You already know which secret I'm talking about. The one you told exactly one person, because you trusted them, because holding it alone felt like pressure behind your sternum, and they were warm and close, and it was late. And then, weeks later, maybe months, it came back, from someone else's mouth, rephrased just enough that they could deny the source, used to explain something about you that you couldn't defend without confirming. That moment, that sensation of the floor moving. That is what this is about. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513. He had been stripped of power, exiled, and tortured on the strappato, a device that dislocated your shoulders, by men who had once called him a colleague. He survived. He was released. And then, alone in a farmhouse outside Florence, he wrote down exactly what he had learned about how human beings actually function. Not how they should function. How they function when interest and loyalty stop pointing in the same direction. His conclusion was not that people are evil. His conclusion was colder. Humans are hierarchical animals under continuous resource pressure. Status is a survival variable. Every organism in a group is constantly, below conscious reasoning, assessing relative position and adjusting behavior accordingly. When your disclosed information becomes useful to another organism's positioning, they will use it, not out of malice, out of gravity. The same way water moves downhill. This is the part that requires a certain tolerance for uncomfortable accuracy. The people closest to you are not operating from malice when they use information you gave them in an unguarded moment. They are operating from biology. They are running the same status calibration every social animal runs, processing your disclosures as data, updating their model of where you sit in the hierarchy, adjusting their behavior towards you accordingly. The adjustment is not a decision. It precedes the decision. It happens in the half-second before anyone has chosen how to respond. Machiavelli spent 14 years serving the Florentine Republic before being stripped of everything by people who had once been colleagues, allies, and friends. What he documented in the farmhouse afterward was not a meditation on betrayal. It was a taxonomy of mechanisms. He did not write about what those people intended. He wrote about what they did, and more precisely, about the conditions that made what they did structurally inevitable, regardless of their intentions. He was a biologist before the discipline existed, observing organisms in a dominant structure and recording the patterns with the detachment of someone who had already been destroyed by failing to see them. The danger is not the enemy across the room. The danger is the person who knows your coordinates. The person who has your real ambitions, your unhealed wounds, your financial reality, your suppressed resentments, your active doubts, your past compromises, your full map of everyone around you. Give someone that access, and you have not built intimacy. You have relocated power. The transfer is invisible until circumstances change, and then it is too late to recall what was given. There are 7 categories. Once shared, each shifts the hierarchy against you. The human animal reads vulnerability the way it reads hesitation in prey, automatically, without deliberation, with behavioral consequences that follow before a single conscious decision is made. Here are the 7 secrets Machiavelli would tell you to carry alone. Number 7 is the one that will make you rethink every close relationship you have. Most people who hear it go back and count how many times they've already triggered it without knowing. Stay until 7. What you find out will change how you operate permanently. Secret 1. The true ceiling of your ambition. Share your goals, and you do not gain accountability. You give someone a measuring stick. From that moment, every time they look at you, they calculate the gap between where you are and where you said you would be. That calculation feeds the hierarchy. Every social group, every professional environment, every family runs a constant background process of status calibration. Who is rising, who has stalled, who overestimated themselves. Your disclosed ambition becomes real-time data in that process, updated every time your trajectory is visible. When you struggle, it confirms their position relative to yours. When you succeed modestly, It reframes you as someone who overreached. When you arrive, they were present for the entire arc. The doubt, the delay, the version of you that wasn't there yet. That version is now permanently attached to your arrival. They cannot unknow it. You have arrived, but you arrived carrying the image of yourself before you were ready. The first mechanism is territorial biology. Primates at every level of the dominance hierarchy monitor upward mobility in others as a survival function. A competitor's disclosed timetable is an opportunity to time a move. A rival's declared ambition is threat data that activates monitoring. The person who announces their climb has handed the hierarchy a planning document. They have said, "Here is what I am attempting. Here is the scale. Here is the timeline." Every incumbent with reason to prefer the current order now has coordinates. The second mechanism runs through the people who love you. When you disclose the full scale of your ambition to those in your current orbit, you trigger a threat assessment in every one of them, regardless of their affection. The relationship exists because you fit a specific frame. A version of you that substantially exceeds that frame is a different organism with different options, different leverage, different access. Every hierarchy has incumbents. Your ascent restructures their position whether or not anyone decides to call it competition. The people who love you will unconsciously resist that transition. Not because they want you to fail, because every hierarchy has incumbents, and you are about to stop being one of them. The third mechanism requires no one's participation but your own. Disclosed ambition hands pessimists a target. Every environment contains organisms whose status is partly maintained by identifying ambition that exceeds capability. People who track the gap between what someone claimed they would do and what they actually did. Give them your ceiling, and they have a timeline. Miss a step, and they have evidence. The evidence circulates through social networks without requiring any action on their part. You did their work for them. Machiavelli did not advise the prince to announce his campaigns. He advised concealment until position was established, because a goal stated can be managed, timed, and weighted out by everyone with a reason to prefer the current order. Work at a magnitude no one has mapped. Let results arrive from a direction no one anticipated. There is no trajectory to disrupt. There is only an arrival the room must now process from a position of completed fact rather than declared intention. But here is what almost no one considers. The damage from Secret 1 requires someone to hear your ambition. Secret 2 operates on something you already gave them. Something they're holding right now, whether the relationship is still warm or not. Secret 2. The wounds you have not yet finished healing. The sharpest cuts do not come from enemies. They come from people who were handed your wound in a warm room and carried it into a cold one. It is never dramatic. There is no scene. There is a conversation that turns competitive, and someone mentions, with affection, almost nostalgia, that you have always had trouble trusting authority. They remember the night you explained why. They are not attacking you. They are reaching for the data they have on you, the way any organism reaches for the tool that fits the situation. Person who knows where your walls are thin. Person who knows where your walls are thin does not have to press. The knowledge reshapes every negotiation, every confrontation, every moment when interests diverge, without any decision to use it, because it is simply in the room. The human animal reads unhealed wounds as status information. Visible suffering signals low resilience. Low resilience signals low rank. The mammalian brain runs that assessment in under a second. The person presenting unhealed wounds is broadcasting a hierarchy position they did not intend to claim, and the hierarchy responds to the broadcast, not the intention. Here is what makes this category irreversible in a way the others are not. The wound, once disclosed, cannot be undisclosed. You can withdraw from the relationship. You can change the context. You cannot retrieve the coordinates. They are stored in someone else's understanding of you, active and available, subject to retrieval whenever the environment shifts. Machiavelli understood that the prince who allowed his suffering to be visible gave rivals a timing mechanism. Strike when the wound is fresh. Negotiate when it is open. Wait when it is healing, because the healing person is dangerous. The exposed wound is the entry point. Once revealed, it can only close, and while it is closing, every person who holds the coordinates is positioned above you in the specific dimension where you are still vulnerable. Heal first. Disclose nothing until the scar tissue is load-bearing. Pity and predation are both responses to weakness. They differ only in execution. Secret 2 is about information that was given with trust. Secret 3 is about information you never meant to give at all. You handed it over in a moment of frustration, and it's been circulating through your network ever since. Secret 3, who you have not forgiven. Resentment is not a private experience once it has been spoken. The moment you name the person you have not forgiven, you do 3 things simultaneously. You reveal where your judgment is compromised. You hand someone a lever, the name that will bypass your composure and produce a reaction instead of a response. And you create a triangulation that feels like intimacy, but is structurally a liability that pays out against you. The lever does not require overt use. The person who knows which name disrupts your composure can position that name passively, surfacing it in rooms where your reaction will be read as instability, as bias, as a score that hasn't been settled. They never say anything. They place the trigger and let the hierarchy do the work. The damage is done before you have identified what happened. The triangulation closes the trap. 2 organisms united against a third generate the chemistry of alliance. That alliance is a transaction. When it stops serving both parties, and it always eventually stops, because interests rotate and alliances restructure, both now hold on record what you said about the third person, who is still operating, who still controls resources, decisions, or access you require. You have given your position away to 2 people, one of whom will eventually have a use for it. The third mechanism is the one that operates entirely without anyone else's participation. The resentment you have named now lives in your public profile. Social networks share status data continuously. The information you disclosed in one relationship circulates through overlapping networks without your authorization or awareness. By the time it reaches someone with reason to use it, you have no record of how it got there. In dominance hierarchies, composure reads as rank. Visible resentment announces that your control has a price and broadcasts the purchase point to every organism in range. Machiavelli, the leader whose private grievances become known, has handed rivals a map. The coalition that wants to displace him does not need to create the fracture. He drew it himself in a warm room, to someone who was paying close attention. Secrets 1 through 3 involve things you disclosed. Secret 4 is different. It's a number. One number. And the people who already know it are already using it against you in every transaction, right now. Secret 4. The exact amount of your money. Resource disclosure is rank disclosure. The brain processes financial information as status data below conscious reasoning. Evolutionary architecture. In every social species, resource access determines hierarchy position. The individual who reveals their precise resource position provides every other organism in the group with an updated calibration, one that shapes their behavior toward you whether or not they ever consciously register that an update has occurred. If they know you have more, expectation recalibrates. Favors become natural. Refusals read as withholding. Generosity becomes the floor, not the ceiling. Every transaction gets filtered through the number you disclosed in a moment of openness. And that number governs the emotional arithmetic of every exchange from that moment forward. The relationship stops being between 2 people and starts being between you and the gap between what they know you have and what they are receiving. If they know you have less, respect recalibrates automatically. The mammalian brain reads resource scarcity as low status and adjusts deference accordingly. Not a choice, a reflex. The person who knows your financial constraints holds leverage they did not seek and will exercise without recognizing they are exercising it. In every negotiation, every request, every moment when they consider how much to invest in you versus alternatives. A third mechanism operates below both. The person who knows your exact position has calculated your options. Options are leverage. When someone knows your ceiling, they know your walkaway point. They know how long you can sustain a negotiation, resist a lowball offer, hold a position under pressure. They have your range. You do not have theirs. Every negotiation you enter with that person is already partially decided, before the first word is spoken. Machiavelli on the treasury. The prince who reveals its state gives enemies a planning horizon and gives allies a reason to recalculate their investment. The number tells them when you can be pressured and how much patience is required. Let the number stay unknown. You cannot be priced. The calculation against you cannot be completed. Now, what happens when the information that damages you isn't something you told anyone? It's something you showed them without realizing. Secret 5 is the one people trigger while trying to appear strong. Secret 5. Your doubts about the path you have chosen. Doubt is a cognitive tool, internal pressure that sharpens execution and forces recalibration. The moment it leaves your mouth, it becomes signal in someone else's probability model. The people adjacent to your outcome are organisms allocating their own resources, time, trust, effort, capital, based on their read of your momentum. Disclosed doubt moves their probability estimate. Updated estimates produce updated behaviors. Mentors begin protecting themselves from the cost of having endorsed you. Partners build contingencies. Colleagues quietly maintain alternatives. None of them have decided to abandon you. They have responded to data. The mechanism compounds. Their withdrawal of full confidence changes your environment. Less support, more hedging, a cooler temperature in the room. That environmental shift makes the original doubt more likely to materialize, which confirms the probability adjustment, which produces further withdrawal. You have started a feedback loop by speaking one sentence in a moment of openness. Disclosed doubt does not relieve internal pressure. It distributes it outward and then adds new pressure from every person now managing distance from your possible failure. Machiavelli. The prince who questions his rule aloud plants the first seed of his succession. Not in enemies, in allies, in the people who were most committed, because those are the people he spoke to honestly. The seed grows in the warmest soil. The doubt that stays private becomes precision. The doubt that gets broadcast becomes evidence. Secret 5 costs you support. Secret 6 costs you something more permanent. It hands someone a remote control to your behavior that runs silently for years, and you never feel it operating. Secret 6. The compromises you have made to survive. Everyone who has moved through real systems of power has made compromised decisions. Alliances that required moral flexibility. Choices that served survival and bent principle. It stays sealed. Disclosure does not produce compassion. It produces a behavioral template. The person who knows you bent once holds a prediction. This organism, under sufficient pressure, will bend again. That prediction reshapes what they ask of you, what they escalate to you, what they threaten when the relationship turns adversarial. You have handed them a model of your behavior under duress, the most valuable intelligence in any negotiation. The more dangerous mechanism requires no adversarial intent. Compromise disclosed creates passive leverage that does not require activation. The holder does not have to threaten. You know they know. That knowledge modifies your behavior without any action required from them. You avoid confrontations where confrontation is in your interest. You extend deference they have not earned. You hold back positions you should press. You become, in those interactions, slightly less than yourself. without any overt force being applied. The leverage is exercised through your awareness of it, at zero cost to the holder, at continuous compounding cost to you. This is the most efficient form of control in any hierarchy, the control the controlled party administers to themselves. Machiavelli. The prince whose unflattering history is accessible cannot fully govern his present. Every decision is made in the shadow of what could be surfaced. The shadow governs the room before the first word is spoken. Your compromises are yours. They require containment, not confession. Now we reach it. Secret 7 is the one that operates without you saying a single word. You don't disclose anything. You don't confess. You simply hold information. And the act of holding it, once they sense it, starts a clock you cannot stop. Most people watching this have already started it with at least one person close to them. Secret 7. The full scope of what you know about them. You hold information about the people around you, their failures, their wreckage, the versions of themselves they are working to leave behind. You hold it because proximity creates disclosure and disclosure accumulates. It was given freely, in warmth, in the implicit contract of closeness. The temptation is to signal it, not to threaten, to demonstrate intimacy, to show you have been paying attention. In adversarial moments, the accumulated knowledge feels like ballast against their weight. Do not touch it. The moment a person registers that you hold a complete map of them, including the terrain they have worked to obscure, the relationship changes at the level of nervous system response. The mammalian brain is a surveillance detector. It evolved to identify when another organism is tracking its vulnerabilities, building a model of its weaknesses. That detection is not cognitive. It is felt as a background unease that escalates over time into the need to create distance. They do not decide to withdraw. They find that proximity to you produces a specific discomfort they cannot articulate. They become guarded without identifying the trigger. Access reduces. Availability decreases. They drift rather than exit, which means you never get the confrontation that would allow you to address it. You simply find, over months, that a person who was once open is now managing their exposure to you. You have lost their unguarded proximity, the most valuable thing they could offer, for zero strategic gain. The knowledge implied was never activated. It only triggered the detection reflex and started the clock on their departure. Their continued openness is worth more than any moment of pressure their discomfort could create. The open asset keeps generating. The closed one is a memory. Machiavelli. The entity perceived as observing loses cooperation before it applies a single unit of pressure. The surveillance does not need to be real. It only needs to be felt. Know everything. Signal nothing. The map is for navigation, not display. 7 categories. 1 mechanism. The human animal reads vulnerability and adjusts hierarchy position, below conscious intent, faster than deliberate decision, with the consistency of reflex. The dominance hierarchy is the operating system. Every group runs 1. Every group has always run 1. Status is continuously recalculated based on incoming data. Every disclosure you make is processed as status data before it is processed as communication. Before the person across from you has decided how to respond, their brain has already updated your position. The response they give emerges from that updated position, not from a clean read of the words. This is why the same statement lands differently from different people. The words are identical. The perceived status of the speaker is not. Ambition disclosed. Triggers upward mobility threat assessment. Another individual's declared assent activates territorial monitoring in every incumbent. The response, subtle resistance, competitive positioning, unconscious obstruction, emerges without a conscious decision to compete. Wounds disclosed. Registers as low resilience in the hierarchy's ongoing fitness evaluation. Low resilience signals low rank. Reduced deference and increased pressure. Testing follow the read. Not a decision to exploit. A response to updated status data. Resentments disclosed. maps fracture lines and leverage points into social memory. Networks share status data continuously and without authorization. Fracture lines are status data. They circulate without requiring anyone to carry them. Finances disclosed. Executes a resource recalibration. Every adjacent organism now has updated information about your options, your walkaway point, your range under pressure. The recalibration is not moral. It is computational. Doubts disclosed. Updates probability assessments in every adjacent organism. Rational actors reduce investment in declining probability. The reduction is automatic. Compromise is disclosed. Installs a behavioral prediction model and creates self-administered leverage. The leverage runs continuously, at zero cost to the holder. Surveillance detected. Triggers flight response. The same reflex that pulls an organism away from a predator's sustained attention. It does not require evidence of threat. It requires only the perception of being mapped. 7 mechanisms. 0 malice required. Each runs on hardware that predates language, in environments that have never stopped being hierarchical, regardless of what they call themselves. Machiavelli did not write philosophy. He observed organisms in dominance structures and recorded what he saw with enough precision that his observations have held for 500 years. The prince who understood the mechanisms operated through them. The prince who did not was operated on by them. You are one or the other. The mechanisms do not have a neutral position. Stop. Before this fades, locate the moment. You know which one. The room where it was warm and the armor felt unnecessary. The conversation where you walked out lighter, which felt like relief and was the sensation of load-bearing information leaving your control. It cannot be undone. But the reflex that produced it can be interrupted. In each of the 7 categories, find the version that applies to your life right now. The ambition disclosed in a moment of excitement to someone who is still in your orbit, still calculating your trajectory. The wound described to someone who is still close enough to press it when interests diverge. The resentment named to someone still in contact with the person you named. The financial number given in a moment of trust to someone who now has your range. The doubt spoken aloud to someone whose confidence in you was a resource you needed. The compromise confessed in a moment of intimacy to someone who now holds a behavioral prediction model of you. The knowledge of others you signaled to demonstrate that you understood the room. Each disclosure is still live, in circulation, processed by mechanisms you cannot monitor, used by organisms who are not consciously using it, because the mechanisms do not require conscious use. They run below that layer, adjusting behavior the way an updated probability model adjusts a prediction, automatically, continuously, without announcement. Machiavelli. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. The gap between what you project and what you hold is not a lie. It is the only architecture that holds weight under pressure. The person whose interior is fully visible has handed the hierarchy everything required to manage them. Their ambition can be timed, their wounds pressed, their resentments activated, their doubts amplified, their compromises invoked, their surveillance triggered. The person whose interior is sealed moves through the same environments, builds the same relationships, creates the same proximity, and remains unmanageable. Not because they are stronger, because there are no accessible coordinates. Your closest friends love you. The information they hold does not care. 7 categories, 7 sealed compartments. The room is full of people who know you. None of them know all of you. That is not isolation. That is the only position from which power does not ask permission. Subscribe for more videos like this.